I am shocked how fun a CUV is to drive. This is essentially a baby Macan. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my 2023 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus trim, MSRP of around $42,000. And today we're going to answer the question, should you buy a Mazda CX-50? Now this is my third video in this long-term owner's review series. I'll be making more in the future as well. I've had the car since Thanksgiving of 2022. I have a little bit over 3,000 miles on the car now. I'm going to tell you about the ownership experience, the things I like, the things I don't like, and finally whether or not I would recommend this vehicle. So beginning with the exterior, I think most people would agree this is one of the most handsome CUVs on the market right now. This is essentially a CX-50 that's been given a few injections of testosterone. It looks a little bit more muscular, a little bit more broader, more squared off shoulders. It looks more rugged with the plastic cladding. Normally, I don't like plastic cladding, but on this car, I think it really works well. Now, there is a little bit of false advertising in the sense that this plastic skid plate looking thing here is not an actual skid plate. It's just stylistic. The actual off-road capabilities of the car obviously are not that great. This is still, at the end of the day, a CUV. Compact CUV, shares the same platform as the Mazda 3 and CX-30. Not the same platform as the CX-5. The CX-5 has independent rear suspension. This actually has torsion beam. And even the rear. I love the rear actually. When I'm driving my GR86 and I see one of these on the road, I do a double take. I'm like, God damn, that is a nice looking CUV. Fake vents over here. Fake vents are never as cool as real vents, but I think styling wise, it works okay here. Now, on the higher trim levels, this is again Turbo Premium Plus, the highest trim, you get these large 20-inch wheels. And I think they look good. I think these diamond cut wheels are very much in vogue right now. They look good on this car. They're very fitting, but they're not the most comfortable as a result. You have far less sidewall, and if you were to downsize to the 17s, you'd have more sidewall and a softer ride, as well as more capability and less stress when you are off-roading. So again, most people are not going to be really off-roading in their CX-50. I did go fishing recently, did not catch any fish, although I made some friends with some horses, and it was very light off-roading. Keyword, very light. And you know, the car can handle that totally fine, but most cars could handle that totally fine. If you do want to do serious off-roading, you're going to have to change the wheels, change the tires. But if you're like most of us, it'll probably mostly just be seeing the pavement. Moving on to the interior, let's start with the rear seats. I'm going to fold these seats back up. I'm 6'1", sitting behind myself, and I'm comfortable. I'm not cramped. My knees are not touching. I have a good amount of headroom, maybe about 2 inches. And it feels like an okay place to be. I mean, these plastics are a little bit soft and cheap. The handle as well, not the highest quality. But the actual leather and the way it looks is far more premium. Definitely more so than its main competitors, the Toyotas, the Hondas, the Kias, and the Hyundais. When you start poking around and touching various things, like the center armrest, it feels premium. It doesn't quite feel luxury. I guess it would be entry luxury or premium, but definitely not normal economy. In the Savage Geese video, he pointed out that the seats, they would just lift up, but that was because they had a pre-production model. These ones feel totally fine. I have no issues with the comfort in the seats. I'm 6'1", 170 pounds. Some people mentioned that this strip right here feels like there's a credit card up their backside. I personally have not felt that way, although I have been driving this car in the colder months, and I figured, oh, maybe once I start wearing, shorts and just a t-shirt and no jacket, I'll feel it more. But I actually go to the gym wearing just shorts and tee, and it doesn't bother me at all. I never really notice it. Moving up to the driver's seat. It's a nice cockpit. It is a nice place to be. That chime when you're not wearing a seatbelt drives many people crazy, including me. Now, again, premium / entry luxury. Very nice materials on the steering wheel. I love that we have this very tactile HVAC control that has this beautiful clicking sound and texture to it. When everyone is going to screens and capacitive touch, we have proper physical buttons. Heated and cooled seats, heated steering wheel. Some things I also pointed out in a previous video, you can set the steering wheel and seat to actually automatically turn on and off based on your HVAC setting. So with high, you would expect this to turn on, but it's a bit inconsistent. Sometimes it turns on, sometimes it doesn't. Not a big deal to just manually control it. We do have a bit of this ugly piano black, which after a few months, I mean, I do get this washed every month, but you know, I was starting to see a few scratches. It's not the most appealing thing as it wears. It looks nice when it's brand new. We have the wireless charger here. That is 100% useless. It has never worked. I've even taken it to the Mazda dealership and they told me, nope, looks fine. And I'm using an iPhone, what is this, 14 Pro? So I just got one of these. These cables have a right angle. It's a right angle both here as well as on the USB-A end, which makes it much easier to not be in the way of the various things I have in that compartment. And it also allows this to slot right here without jutting into this piece and causing issues. So if you guys want a right angle cable just like this, check out the description. There are many small touches and features throughout the car that make it feel much more premium, starting with the 360 cam. I used to think that these were just silly gimmicks and I only needed a reverse cam, but now that I have a 360 cam, I'm like, goddamn, this is actually quite nice. I enjoy it. Panoramic sunroof. We got this ugly support bar here, which is necessary, but it's all good. I still enjoy it. I leave this thing open all the time. Got my windows tinted as well. Block all that nasty UV. If you do want to open this, it's quite limited. It doesn't open up very much, which, I mean, look at that. What is that? 5 inches? 6 inches? So I don't really open this much for obvious reasons, but I tend to keep it like that. They've made some nice efforts here with this, what do you want to call this, baseball stitching, because it looks like something straight out of a horror movie. But you see that theme repeated here and here on the doors, even on the steering wheel on the inside right here. And it's a nice touch. They're definitely paying attention to detail, trying to make this car feel more premium. Some things I don't like, this is like a chrome finish, and depending on when you're driving, the sunlight can reflect right here and blind you, which is kind of annoying. I wish they used more of a satin finish instead. Although this is not a sports car, I tend to drive it like one occasionally, and I wish that we had some padding on the sides here for the legs. Not a huge deal, but it's, again, a little nice to have in the top trim. By the way, those winter storm warnings are so annoying. You cannot disable them, and this past winter, I've been getting so many every single day. And it's not just your county, it's like the surrounding counties. So places that are several hours away, hundreds of miles away, I'm still getting notified here, which I wish I could just completely disable. It is quite annoying. The gauge cluster, I like that we have a very traditional and analog style. The center one you can change. The center one is digital. The side ones are analog, of course. But you can't actually see all that much. You have this graphic, which shows you not much actually. It's just your car and then the lanes, and you know, you have your radar guided cruise control and lane keep assist. I tend to keep it in this view, which is the most traditional, because clearly I'm an old man at heart. But for those who are new here, my channel tends to talk the most about driving dynamics. That's what I care the most about. And even though this is a CUV, it might be an important consideration in your purchase decision. And that's actually one of my favorite parts about this vehicle. I am shocked how fun a CUV is to drive. This is essentially a baby Macan. Does it drive as well as a Macan? No. But it's the next best thing. Part of the way they were able to achieve that is by having this sprung a bit stiff. So it has very good body control when you're braking, accelerating, cornering. But the trade-off there is that the ride is a little bit harsh, at least compared to some other vehicles in this class. Now keep in mind, every reviewer has their own biases. And let me be upfront with mine. I love sports cars. I love driving hard. I like going to the racetrack. I like driving like a hoonigan. And for that reason, I don't mind a bit of a harsher ride. If you're used to driving S-Class Mercedes and you get into this, you're going to think that this feels rough. But if you're used to driving sports cars, as I am, this feels incredibly plush. So you can only decide that for yourself after getting behind the wheel or sitting along for the ride. The other thing that speaks to my bias is the steering. Good Lord, they put an amazing steering rack in this car. The way it loads up, the amount of feedback you get through the steering wheel this is a sports car steering rack. It has a very heavy weight, which again, given my biases, I don't mind in the slightest. I actually quite enjoy. I think those who complain that this is too heavy and that they can't drive it with one hand need to hit the gym because, I mean, it's a little bit heavier than other vehicles, especially vehicles in this class that have very over-boosted steering, but I do not think that it is heavy enough to cause a unpleasurable driving experience. In this top-end Turbo Premium Plus model, we get speed limit recognition, so you can see 35 miles an hour on the HUD. And if you look at my speedometer right here, you'll actually see a red line as to where the speed limit is. And as I go beyond that, you can see the line extend to remind me to not be too much of a hoonigan. And driving here in Vegas, I feel like if more drivers had that, it would be beneficial for everyone's safety. Going back to the driving, I've spoken about this a bit in other videos. I am very much used to the car now. There's nothing that, when I'm driving, there's nothing that bothers me. There's nothing that really sticks out. But when you first get into it, or perhaps after getting out from another vehicle, you will notice a few deficiencies. Number one is the throttle response is a bit inconsistent. So there's this thing called cohesion between all the driver inputs, right? So you want the steering, the throttle, the brake, the transmission, everything to feel like it's part of the same vehicle. It's all speaking the same language. It's all part of the same theme. And the issue in this car is that they're not all speaking the same language. So the steering is straight sports car. But everything else is a little bit more traditional CUV with a slight sporty touch, slightly, but not quite to the same degree as the steering. So the throttle, as an example, is a bit sluggish. It's a bit, you get used to it. It's not inconsistent. It's just a bit sluggish. Now someone might say, hey Kevin, put it into sport mode. So right here, we have the drive modes, and we'll put it into sport. And we get the red on the speedometer. Fantastic. So sure, you get more aggressive throttle response, but now you're also getting more aggressive shift points. So you don't want to do that day to day because now you're killing your fuel economy. Rather than driving at 2,000 RPM at 50 miles an hour, you're now driving at 2,500 RPM. So not a viable solution. The brakes are a little bit wooden. They sometimes feel a little bit slow to respond. They require a bit more travel than I think they should. Here we go again, another winter storm warning. I got it, thank you. But again, these are things that I have gotten used to. I just notice this when I jump into the car for the first time after driving something else. And it's just me being straightforward and honest with you guys about what the driving experience is. I focus very much so on the driving experience when I get behind the wheel. And this driving experience is good, especially for a CUV, but it is not without its limitations. There's a CX-5, which I consider the ugly sibling to the CX-50. Even though it has independent rear suspension, which is superior, I would definitely take this. Speaking of the independent rear suspension, you're essentially never really going to notice it. I would say 95% of the time you won't notice it, 5% of the time you will, and that has to do with uneven suspension compression on the rear end. That's when I notice it. Going off my driveway at an angle, as an example, I definitely notice it then. And there are a few instances driving around town, but for the most part, you won't notice it. And if you are less of a driving enthusiast and less of a car nerd, then you'll probably notice it even less than 5% of the time. Now, I have logged every single fuel up in this car, and I'm getting 22 miles per gallon on average, but I've been filling almost exclusively with premium gas. Now, I did one tank of regular octane, and I noticed that the car was more sluggish because Mazda actually adjusts the timing, and the engine will sense the octane. If it senses knock, it's going to dial back the timing. You're going to make less power. I like driving like a hoonigan, so again, I generally put in the premium gas. But to do a little experiment, I put in regular gas recently, and we're going to see how my fuel efficiency changes. 22 is probably lower than what most people are going to get, but that's because I tend to drive like an idiot most of the time. So who is this car for? Should you buy a Mazda CX-50? I think that I might actually be a near perfect customer for this vehicle. And let me explain why. You can see if you agree or disagree with some of these things, and you can better decide for yourself. So first of all, I love good steering. I love sporty steering racks, and this has by far the best steering rack of any CUV I've ever driven. It's actually better than most sports cars. I drove the Mazda Miata recently, and the 2023, the ND2. This has much better steering than the Mazda Miata even. Yes, I am not kidding. This steering is just as good as some of the best sports car EPS racks out there. I mean, the Porsche came in a little bit better, I'd give it, but it's pretty close. I am not kidding. It's that good. And I love steering, so that speaks to me. I love the styling. I'm a young guy, I'm a bit adventurous, I like doing things like taking my bicycle in the back, I like going fishing and doing random things, trying new things out, and this car has a little bit of the ruggedness. It has a little bit more ground clearance than the CX-5. It's a little bit less urban, a little bit more adventurous, without it being truly focused on being an off-roader, because I don't need that. The most thing I'm doing is going on a slightly bumpy gravel trail, if that. Obviously, my sports car wouldn't be able to handle that, but something like this, as a daily driver, definitely could. I'm also someone who doesn't care that much about fuel efficiency, fuel economy. It's not the highest thing on my list. I would, of course, prefer a fuel-efficient car over one that's not. And the fuel efficiency on this car is not nearly as good as a lot of the competitors. But again, if it's not your highest priority, and for me it's not, then that might not be a big deal for you. Next up is the value. I think the amount of car you get for $42,000. Now, some people think like, oh my God, that's outrageous. Look, you get the top of the line, it's going to be 42. If you want to get the stripper model, it's like 27. Yeah, I think it's actually 27. But if you see how much vehicle you get for 42, I think it's a crazy good value. Everything from heated, ventilated seats, heated steering, the driving dynamics, the interior quality, I drove the Kia Sportage recently. I did a review on that, which you can watch up here. And granted, that was a lower trim level. That wasn't the highest trim level Kia Sportage. But even just the way it drove, it did not feel to be in the same class of vehicle as this, even though on paper, it technically is. In terms of engine options, you can do either a naturally aspirated or turbocharged 2.5 liter four-cylinder. And if you're like me, you have a bit of a lead foot, you like going fast, then the 2.5 liter turbo is the engine you want, and it definitely feels adequate for this kind of vehicle. Is it going to rip your face off? It's not a Durango Hellcat by any means, but this car does not feel slow. It feels quick. It feels very fast for what it is, actually. If you want something that feels a bit premium without shelling out German luxury prices, then this is really hard to beat, because price-wise, you're competing with the Hondas, the Toyotas, the Hyundais, the Kias, etc. But you're getting an experience that feels a little bit more Acura and Lexus. Something that feels premium to even entry luxury. And I very much appreciate that. Also, when you go into manual mode, look what they did. They did the shift directions in the right direction. Forward is down, back is up. I love that. Speaking of the transmission, it's a old school 6-speed, torque converter. Now, granted, it does have a multi-clutch pack, which has some benefits there with regards to torque, handling torque, but people sometimes poo-poo on this, saying, hey, this needs an 8-speed, the 6-speed is so antiquated. Look, there's two reasons you want more speeds on your transmission. Number one is better performance with regards to acceleration, so you can get into the power band because the engine, it makes, more or less power or torque at certain RPMs. And number two is fuel efficiency, so that when you're driving, cruising at whatever speed, whether it's highway speed or just driving around town, you can be at a low enough RPM that you're not being wasteful of fuel. And the way that this engine is tuned, it is so torquey, it almost feels like a diesel motor. You don't need more than 6 speeds. The transmission is smooth, the shifts are fast, the shift logic is fine, and performance-wise, with acceleration and fuel efficiency-wise, well, the fuel efficiency isn't great, but that's not because of the transmission. Because at highway speeds, you're at 2,000, actually when I'm going like 65, I'm at less than 2,000 RPM. So the transmission is not a problem at all. I have had no issues with the car so far. Small things like the wireless charger not working, or this HVAC, even though you have feet only, it'll blow some warm air from this, which is kind of annoying. You have to then close this and close the other side too, which is kind of strange. And there are small things here and there that annoy various people for various reasons. One thing that bothers a lot of people is how far away this display is. And it's harder to touch. You have to lean a little bit, it's not too bad. Just go here and touch, do whatever you need. But the way that they designed this infotainment control over here with the volume knob and this D-pad is fantastic. They did such a good job. And I discussed in a previous video why, from a biological perspective, with how your eye muscles work, your ciliary muscles in your eye, why this is actually better. So if you haven't already, be sure to check out that video. Much love, my friends. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know if this helped. What do you think of the CX-50? And I'll see you guys in the next one.